the dusty frontier town of Whispering Creek, Clara Morrison taught children by day and wrestled with strange dreams by night. For years, the same visions haunted her. Ancient symbols, desert landscapes, and faces she'd never seen yet somehow knew. One scorching summer afternoon, seeking solace in Shadow Canyon, she stumbled upon an impossible sight. There, under an overhanging cliff, worked a lone Apache warrior, his hands steadily painting the very images that tormented her sleep. Her private nightmares displayed on stone, rendered by a stranger's hand. The warrior turned slowly, unsurprised by her presence, his eyes reflecting recognition where none should exist. How could he know the landscapes of her mind? What ancient connection bound their souls across time and blood? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Whispering Creek lay nestled between rolling hills and vast open plains, a town of wooden storefronts and weathered homesteads. In 1883, it existed as little more than a dusty waypoint between larger settlements, notable only for its reliable spring and relative peace with neighboring Apache bands. Clara Morrison's modest white schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a bell tower rising above its shingled roof. Each morning, she rang that bell precisely at 8 o'clock, her slender hands firm on the rope. Clara had come west 5 years prior, leaving behind a Boston family name but little else. At 32, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her chestnut hair typically fastened in a practical bun, her dresses plain but immaculately kept. "Good morning, children," Clara said, watching her 12 students settle into their wooden desks. From 6-year-old Sarah Williams to 14-year-old Thomas Jenkins, they represented Whispering Creek's future, ranchers' children, shopkeepers' offspring, and a handful from homesteads too distant for daily travel who boarded in town. Behind her welcoming smile, exhaustion pulled at Clara. Last night, the dreams had come again, more vivid than ever. She opened her desk drawer, fingers brushing the leather-bound journal hidden beneath primers and lesson plans. Within its pages lay careful documentation of 5 years of recurring dreams, detailed sketches of strange symbols, desert landscapes unlike any near Whispering Creek, and faces with eyes that seemed to recognize her across time. "Miss Morrison?" Young Sarah tugged at her sleeve. "Are you feeling poorly?" Clara composed herself. "Just thinking about our geography lesson, dear. Today we'll discuss the territories west of here." As children copied their arithmetic problems, Clara's mind drifted to her journal entries. The dreams had begun on her 30th birthday, always the same sequence. Desert mesas bathed in moonlight, ancient symbols carved in stone, a circle of elders around a fire, and always a sense of urgent message left undelivered, a promise unfulfilled. At midday, Clara released the children for lunch, watching them scatter into the schoolyard. Eleanor Jenkins approached from her general store across the street, carrying a basket. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Eleanor said, placing fresh bread and preserves on Clara's desk. A widow of 40 with kind eyes and practical hands, Eleanor had been Clara's first friend in Whispering Creek. "Poor sleep," Clara answered, accepting the offering with gratitude. Eleanor studied her with knowing eyes. "Those dreams again?" Clara nodded. She'd shared only vague details with Eleanor, never the full strangeness of her visions. "Perhaps Dr. Matthews could provide a tonic," Eleanor suggested. "It's not illness," Clara replied. "They feel like—" She hesitated. "Like memories I never lived." Eleanor's expression shifted subtly. "My grandmother used to say dreams are sometimes messages from the spirit world." She glanced out the window. "Or echoes from times before." Clara changed the subject, uncomfortable with how accurately Eleanor had named her private thoughts. After school, Clara walked alone to her small cabin at the town's edge. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves, her most treasured possessions brought from Boston. She lit her lamp and retrieved the journal from her satchel. adding last night's details with precise penmanship. She'd never shown the journal to anyone. Even in progressive Boston, such visions might raise uncomfortable questions. Here in the territories, where superstition and prejudice ran deep, such dreams could mark her as unstable or worse. Clara traced her finger over a symbol she'd drawn repeatedly, a spiral intersected by 3 lines. What did it mean? Why did it feel so significant? That evening, as sunset painted the western sky, Clara made a decision. Tomorrow after school, she would visit Shadow Canyon, a place she'd glimpsed in her dreams but never explored in waking life. Perhaps there, among the ancient rocks, she might find answers to the visions that increasingly consumed her thoughts. She closed the journal and slipped it beneath her mattress, unaware that her simple decision would shatter the careful life she had built and awaken something that had waited centuries for her return. Shadow Canyon lived up to its name. As Clara made her way along the narrow path, towering red rock walls blocked the afternoon sun, casting long fingers of darkness across the sandy ground. The air here felt different, cooler, yet somehow heavy with expectation. Clara had told no one of her excursion. She'd dismissed her students promptly at 3, changed into her simplest skirt and sturdy boots, and slipped away from town. The canyon entrance lay just 2 miles east, hidden in a fold of land most settlers ignored. Her heartbeat quickened as she recognized formations from her dreams. A stone arch, a boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, ancient juniper trees twisting from seemingly solid rock. She'd never been here before, yet something in her bones knew the way. The path narrowed, forcing Clara to edge sideways through a crevice. She emerged into a wide alcove, sheltered by an overhanging cliff. The sudden silence was complete. No birds, no wind, just the sound of her own breathing. Then she saw him. A man stood with his back to her, one arm extended toward the canyon wall. In his hand, a primitive brush moved in sure, practiced strokes across the stone surface. His black hair hung long down a muscular back covered only by a sleeveless buckskin vest. Leggings and moccasins completed his attire. But it was the image forming beneath his hand that stopped Clara's breath. A spiral symbol, intersected by 3 lines, identical to the one haunting her dreams for years. Clara must have made some sound, for the man turned. His face showed no surprise at her presence, as though he'd been expecting her all along. Strong features, copper, skin weathered by sun and wind, and eyes so dark they seemed to hold the night sky. Not the fearsome expression settlers whispered about in town, but something far more disturbing: recognition. "You've come," he said in perfect, unaccented English. Clara took an involuntary step backward. "You speak English." "I speak several languages," he replied. "As did you once." "We've never met," Clara said firmly, though something inside her trembled at the certainty in his voice. "Not in this life." His gaze was steady. "I am Maka. Some in your town know me as Thomas Blackwood." Clara's scholarly mind grasped at the practical. "You're educated." A slight smile. "My father was a white translator. My mother, Apache. I walk between worlds." Clara's eyes returned to the painting. Beside the spiral symbol were others. A crescent moon above 3 mountains, a bird with outstretched wings, patterns of dots forming constellations. All from her private dreams, rendered by this stranger's hand. "How can you know these images?" Her voice barely above a whisper. Maka set down his brush, placing it in a stone mortar containing earth-toned pigments ground to fine powder. "The same way you do. They come in dreams." "That's impossible. Yet here we stand." He gestured toward the images. "These have been coming to me since my 30th year. 7 summers ago." Clara felt lightheaded. Her dreams had begun precisely 5 years ago, on her 30th birthday. "The dreams found both of us," Maka continued. "They are older than either of us. Older than our grandparents' grandparents." "What are they?" Clara asked, scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming her fear. Not dreams, Maka said. Memories. Clara shook her head. I've never seen these places. Never drawn these symbols before the dreams. Not in this life, he repeated. But our souls remember. A distant sound, horses approaching, broke the strange spell between them. Maka tilted his head, listening. Riders coming. Your people. His voice carried no judgment. You should return to town. They would not understand finding you here. I have questions, Clara insisted. Maka nodded. Return tomorrow if you wish to learn more. I will be here. He gathered his mortar of pigments. The path that brought you here has been waiting a very long time, Clara Morrison. Her name on his lips sent a shock through her body. She had never introduced herself. Before she could respond, Maka slipped into a narrow crevice in the canyon wall and vanished, leaving Clara alone with the painted images from her dreams and 1,000 new questions burning in her mind. Clara hurried back along the canyon path, mind reeling. The encounter with Maka, his impossible knowledge of her dreams, his calm certainty, had shaken her carefully ordered world. She emerged from the canyon just as the sun touched the western horizon, painting the plains in amber light. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Clara smoothed her skirt and composed herself as 3 riders appeared, silhouetted against the sunset. She recognized Marshal James Rutledge by his broad-brimmed hat and the glint of his silver badge catching the dying light. Miss Morrison? The marshal reined his horse. Bit far from town this late in the day. His tone carried concern laced with something harder. I was collecting botanical specimens for tomorrow's science lesson. The lie came easily, surprising her. Clara had always prided herself on honesty. The marshal's weathered face betrayed skepticism. These canyons aren't safe for a lady alone. We've had reports of Apache moving through these parts. I was perfectly safe, Marshal, Clara replied, keeping her voice steady. The local Apache have kept peace for years. One of Rutledge's deputies spat into the dust. Peace till they decide otherwise. Hernandez lost 3 cattle last week. Throats cut clean. Could have been wolves, Clara suggested. Wolves don't take only the liver and heart, the marshal countered. That's Apache medicine work. Clara thought of Makara's gentle speech, his perfect English, the thoughtful eyes that held no malice. Perhaps we shouldn't judge an entire people by old stories. Marshal Rutledge's expression hardened. These aren't stories, Miss Morrison. I've buried good men after Apache raids. He touched the brim of his hat. We'll escort you back to town. Clara had no choice but to walk beside their mounts, feeling the weight of their suspicion. The marshal and his men represented Whispering Creek's uneasy relationship with the land's original inhabitants. Tolerance when convenient, swift judgment when anything went missing. As they approached town, Clara noticed unusual activity around the saloon. A cluster of men stood in animated conversation, their faces tight with tension. What's happening? She asked. Town meeting, Rutledge answered. Councils discussing the reservation boundaries again. Armies proposing to move the Apache farther south. Clara felt a chill. But they've honored the current boundaries for years. The marshal's second deputy, a younger man named Collins, laughed without humor. Boundaries change. It's the way of things. In town, Clara declined the marshal's offer to see her home. Thank you, but I have errands at Mrs. Jenkins' store. Rutledge nodded curtly. Remember what I said about the canyons, Miss Morrison. Some places aren't meant for civilized folk. Clara watched them ride toward the saloon before turning toward Eleanor's general store. The establishment was empty of customers, unusual for this hour. Eleanor stood behind the counter, sorting coffee beans. You missed quite the spectacle, Eleanor said without looking up. Reverend Phillips practically called for a crusade against the savages at our doorstep. I was taking a walk, Clara replied carefully. Eleanor's keen eyes studied her flushed face. A rather long walk, By the look of you. She lowered her voice. Rutledge has been asking questions about strangers in the area, particularly interested in any educated Indians or half-breeds. Clara's heart quickened. Why? Army's sending an Indian agent next month. They're cataloging all Apache not officially on reservation land. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron. Tea? You look like you could use some. In Eleanor's back room, Clara cradled the hot cup, debating how much to share. Eleanor had always been kind, but town loyalties ran deep. I met someone today, Clara finally said. In Shadow Canyon. Eleanor's expression remained neutral. I suspected as much. You have that look. What look? The look of someone who's glimpsed behind the curtain of the world. Eleanor sipped her tea. Was it him? The one they call Blackwood. Clara nearly dropped her cup. You know of him? Whispering Creek has its secrets. Eleanor's voice grew distant. Some of us have roots deeper than others care to remember. A knock at the store door interrupted them. Eleanor rose to answer it, returning moments later. Town council's requesting all residents at the meeting. Her expression was grim. They're voting on whether to petition the army for immediate Apache removal. Clara set down her cup, thinking of the paintings in the canyon, of Makara's words. Memories, not dreams. Something profound had awakened in her. Something she couldn't turn away from. I need to be there, she said, rising to her feet. Eleanor caught her arm. Be careful, Clara. This town has little patience for Indian sympathizers. I'm not taking sides, Clara replied, though she felt the falsehood of her words. I'm simply seeking truth. Eleanor's eyes held ancient wisdom. In these times, that may be the most dangerous position of all. The town meeting had stretched late into the evening, voices growing louder as whiskey flowed freely. Clara had sat silent in the back of the saloon, watching men she'd known for years transform into something harder, their faces set with righteous certainty as they voted unanimously to petition for Apache removal. Only she and Eleanor had abstained, earning dark glances from neighbors. Now, as afternoon sunlight filtered through her classroom windows, Clara struggled to focus on the grammar lesson. Her mind kept returning to the canyon, to Maka, to the paintings that mirrored her dreams with impossible precision. Class dismissed, she announced earlier than usual. Read chapters 3 and 4 for tomorrow. The children scattered, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. She should stay away from the canyon. The reasonable, prudent part of her, the Boston-bred schoolteacher, knew this. Yet something older and deeper pulled her toward that red rock sanctuary. Before she could reconsider, Clara gathered her shawl and slipped out the back door, taking a circuitous route to avoid being seen leaving town. The weight of her decision pressed upon her with each step toward Shadow Canyon. This time, she found Maka waiting at the entrance, as if he'd sensed her approach. He wore the same buckskin clothing, but had added a blue cotton shirt beneath his vest, a curious blend of his dual heritage. You came back, he said, his deep voice carrying neither surprise nor judgment. I have questions, Clara replied, maintaining a proper distance. Maka nodded. Walk with me. They moved deeper into the canyon, following a path invisible to Clara's eyes. Neither spoke until they reached the alcove with the paintings. In daylight, Clara could see more details, layers of images, some appearing ancient, others freshly applied. How long have you been painting here? She asked. I began 7 summers ago, Maka answered. But these walls have held images for many hundreds of years. He gestured to faded red ochre handprints barely visible beneath newer work. My ancestors spoke to these stones long before your people crossed the great waters. Clara studied the wall. And these symbols from my dreams. You paint them because you dream them too? Yes. Maka crouched by his small fire pit, stirring embers with a stick. The dreams came suddenly on my 30th summer. At first, I thought the spirits were sending visions. My mother's people believe dreams carry messages from the other world. I don't believe in spirits, Clara said firmly. Mako's smile was gentle. What you believe changes nothing of what is true. He reached into a pouch at his waist, withdrawing something small and wooden. Here, I made this for you. Clara hesitated before accepting the object. A perfectly carved wooden bird, wings outstretched in flight, details so fine she could see individual feathers. A messenger, Maka explained. In the old stories, birds carry words between worlds. The carving felt warm in her palm, as if still containing the life of the wood. Thank you, she said, genuinely moved by the gift's beauty. But I don't understand why I'm here, why these dreams connect us. Maka studied her face. You said your dreams began on your 30th birthday? Clara nodded. Among my mother's people, 30 summers marks when a soul has gathered enough wisdom to remember its longer journey. He added a small branch to the fire. Clara Morrison is not your first name, just as Thomas Blackwood is not mine. You're suggesting reincarnation? Clara couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I'm suggesting memory, Maka corrected. The land remembers. The stones remember. Why not souls? A chill ran through Clara despite the afternoon heat. These images, you believe they're memories of past lives? Of people we once were? Not just people. Maka's eyes held hers steadily. The same people, meeting again and again across time. Clara clutched the wooden bird tightly. That's impossible to prove. Not impossible, Maka said. Merely difficult. He gestured to the canyon walls. This place holds keys to memories locked inside us. That's why we're both drawn here. The town voted last night, Clara said abruptly, changing the subject. They're petitioning the army to remove all Apache from the area. Maka's expression remained calm. The cycle continues. Aren't you worried? Fear changes nothing. He reached out slowly, his fingertips nearly touching the wooden bird in her hand. You feel it too, this connection. It goes beyond dreams. Clara couldn't deny the strange familiarity she felt in his presence. A recognition deeper than reason. She stepped back, creating distance. I should return before I'm missed. Maka nodded, respect in his eyes. The path between us has been walked many times, Clara Morrison. You'll return when you're ready to remember. Clara slipped the wooden bird into her pocket, its presence a small weight against her hip as she made her way back toward town, questions multiplying with each step. Who can tell me where the Rocky Mountains begin? Clara asked, pointing to the large map hanging at the front of the classroom. Her students' faces looked back at her with varying degrees of interest and confusion. Tommy Jenkins raised his hand, a rare occurrence that brought a smile to Clara's face. Eleanor's 10-year-old son typically spent more time gazing out the window than engaging with lessons. They start up in the Northern Territories and go all the way down through Colorado, the boy answered confidently. Very good, Tommy, Clara nodded, pleased by his unexpected knowledge. And what tribes lived in those mountain regions? Tommy's eyes lit up. Shoshone in the north, Ute in the middle parts, and Apache in the south. Clara paused, suddenly more attentive. That's correct. You've been studying your geography book. Pa had books about the mountains, Tommy said, referring to his late father. And I heard stories from... He stopped abruptly, glancing at the other children. From whom, Tommy? Clara prompted gently. The boy shrugged. Just people passing through. Clara continued the lesson but kept an eye on Tommy. During the midday break, while other children played in the schoolyard, she noticed him sitting alone under the cottonwood tree, bent over a slate. May I see what you're drawing? Clara asked, approaching him. Tommy hesitated before turning the slate toward her. Clara's breath caught in her throat. There on the rough surface was a crude but recognizable rendition of the spiral symbol from her dreams, the same one Maka had painted on the canyon wall. Where did you see this, Tommy? She kept her voice casual despite her racing heart. "In the old rocks," he answered vaguely. "It's a special sign." "What does it mean?" Tommy glanced around, then lowered his voice. "It's about souls coming back." The man said it means a circle that doesn't end. "What man, Tommy?" The boy looked down. "Just a man who knows things. Ma says I shouldn't talk about him because people wouldn't understand." Before Clara could press further, Sarah Williams ran up, her pigtails bouncing. "Miss Morrison, Billy pulled my hair again." The moment lost, Clara returned to her teacher's duties. But the image on Tommy's slate haunted her through the afternoon lessons. When school ended, she held the boy back. "Tommy, this symbol you drew, it's very interesting. Would you make me a copy to keep?" The boy looked uncertain but took a fresh piece of paper and carefully reproduced the spiral with its intersecting lines. Clara noticed he added small details she hadn't seen before. Tiny marks around the outer edge. "Perfect," she said, accepting the drawing. "Tommy, the man who showed you this, was he called Maka? Or perhaps Thomas Blackwood?" Tommy's eyes widened. "You know him?" "We've met," Clara said carefully. "Does your mother know you've spoken with him?" "Ma's the one who takes me to see him sometimes," Tommy confessed. "She says he's family from long ago, but it's a secret because of how people are about Indians." Clara digested this revelation. Eleanor Jenkins, respectable widow and shopkeeper, had connections to Maka she hadn't disclosed. That evening, Clara attended the town council meeting in the church basement. Marshal Rutledge presented the petition for Apache removal, now signed by nearly every adult in Whispering Creek. "The territorial governor assures me troops can be here within 3 weeks," Rutledge announced to murmurs of approval. "They'll escort all Indians in the area to the southern reservation." "What about peaceful Indians?" Clara found herself speaking up. "Those who've lived alongside us for years without trouble?" Councilman Williams, Sarah's father, turned to her with a frown. "Miss Morrison, there's no such thing as a peaceful Indian when cattle go missing and homesteads get raided." "There's been no raid in 5 years," Clara countered. "And no proof Apache took those cattle." "Spoken like someone who's never seen what they're capable of," Rutledge said darkly. "No disrespect, Miss Morrison, but you've been here, what, 5 years? Some of us buried friends and family after the Canyon Creek massacre. That was a different band, from hundreds of miles south," Clara persisted. "They're all the same when blood starts flowing," Williams muttered, earning nods from around the room. After the meeting, Clara walked home under a sky brilliant with stars. The wooden bird in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each step. Tomorrow she would confront Eleanor about her connection to Maka, and perhaps learn more about the symbols appearing throughout her carefully ordered world. Clara approached the general store before opening hours, determined to speak with Eleanor privately. Through the window, she could see the widow arranging goods on shelves, her movements efficient after years of practice. Eleanor looked up at Clara's knock, her expression shifting to resignation as she unlocked the door. "I wondered when you'd come asking." Clara followed her inside, the familiar smell of coffee, leather, and dried goods enveloping them. "Tommy drew something yesterday," she said without preamble, placing the boy's drawing on the counter. "A symbol I've seen before." Eleanor glanced at the paper, then continued stocking shelves. "Children draw many things. This exact symbol appears in my dreams," Clara pressed. "And on the canyon wall where Maka paints. Tommy says you take him there." Eleanor's hands stilled. For a long moment, only the tick of the wall clock broke the silence. Finally, she turned to face Clara. "Some conversations require tea," she said, gesturing toward her back room. Once they were seated with steaming cups, Eleanor opened an old trunk in the corner. From beneath layers of fabric, she withdrew a wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "My grandmother left me this," she explained, opening it carefully. "She came west in 1821, one of the first white women in these parts." From the box, Eleanor removed a daguerreotype in a tarnished silver frame. The image showed a young woman in pioneer dress standing beside a tall Native American man in partial traditional clothing, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "My grandmother Elizabeth and her friend Swift Eagle," Eleanor said, passing the image to Clara. "Not husband and wife, she was already married to my grandfather, but something just as binding. He saved her during a blizzard, nursed her back to health when everyone thought her dead." Clara studied the faded image. "They look connected." Grandmother called it soul recognition. Said the moment she saw him, she knew him, though they'd never met. Eleanor took back the photograph, touching it gently. Swift Eagle was Apache, a medicine man. He told her they had walked many lives together, sometimes as family, sometimes as enemies, sometimes as lovers. "That sounds like what Maka told me," Clara whispered. Eleanor nodded. Swift Eagle was Maka's great-grandfather. The knowledge passes through their line. She hesitated, just as it sometimes passes through ours. Ours? My grandmother had 2 daughters. My mother, who married a shopkeeper's son, and her sister, who died young. Eleanor's eyes met Clara's steadily. "That sister was your grandmother, Clara." The teacup trembled in Clara's hand. "That's impossible. My family is from Boston." "Your father was born in Boston, yes. But your grandmother Mary left here in 1835 after her sister's death. She married in St. Louis, then moved east." Eleanor reached for Clara's hand. "You're my second cousin. Our blood carries the same memories." Clara withdrew her hand. "This is absurd. I would know if we were related." "Would you?" Eleanor challenged gently. "You felt drawn to this place since you arrived. Your dreams began on your 30th birthday, the age when the memories typically awaken. And you found Maka, just as our grandmother found Swift Eagle." Clara stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. "This is mere coincidence and superstition." Eleanor remained calm. "Is it? Then how did I know you were coming to Whispering Creek before you arrived? Why did I write to the school board recommending you for the position when you were still in Boston?" "You? What?" "I've been waiting for you, Clara." Eleanor's voice softened. "Just as Maka has been waiting." Clara backed toward the door. "You've been manipulating me from the beginning." "Not manipulating. Guiding." Eleanor returned the photograph to its box. "The cycle is completing again. It happens every 100 years." "What cycle?" Clara demanded. Before Eleanor could answer, they heard the shop door open, followed by heavy footsteps. "Mrs. Jenkins?" Marshall Rutledge's voice called. Eleanor closed the wooden box quickly. "This conversation isn't finished," she whispered to Clara. "Watch for signs." Your hairbrush moved to the other side of your dresser. Books rearranging on shelves. The land is waking up around you. Clara frowned. "How did you know about my hairbrush?" But Eleanor was already moving to greet the marshal, her shopkeeper's smile firmly in place. That night, Clara returned to her small cabin troubled by Eleanor's revelations. Could they truly be related? Was this elaborate tale of reincarnation and soul recognition merely the fantasy of isolated frontier minds? She lit her lamp and reached for her journal, then froze. The book lay open on her desk, though she distinctly remembered placing it under her mattress. On the open page, a pressed flower marked her most recent entry, a flower she had never seen before. Whispering Creek's library occupied the second floor of the town hall, a single room lined with donated books and occasional government publications. Clara had spent many hours there since arriving 5 years ago, but today her research had a new urgency. Mrs. Pearson, the elderly volunteer librarian, looked up from her knitting as Clara entered. "Good afternoon, Miss Morrison. Seeking new material for your students." "Personal research today," Clara replied, moving directly to the small section on native cultures. The collection was sparse, a few missionary accounts, an outdated military survey, and a worn copy of Indigenous Peoples of the American Southwest. Clara paged through them carefully, finding only brief, dismissive mentions of Apache spiritual beliefs. Looking for something specific? Mrs. Pearson had approached without Clara noticing. Information about dreams, Clara answered carefully, particularly how different cultures interpret them. Mrs. Pearson's knitting needles stilled. There's a volume in the restricted cabinet that might interest you, not officially cataloged. The restricted cabinet held books deemed potentially unsuitable for general circulation, scientific works challenging biblical creation, novels considered morally questionable, and apparently certain anthropological studies. From this cabinet, Mrs. Pearson withdrew a leather-bound journal titled Ethnographic Observations of Apache Ceremonial Practices, 1851. The author, one Professor James Harrington of Pennsylvania, had spent 3 years living among various Apache bands. Page 94, Mrs. Pearson said quietly before returning to her desk. Clara found the indicated page, where Harrington had documented dream rituals and their significance. One passage captured her attention immediately. The Apache medicine men speak of dreamwalking, a practice wherein certain individuals with special spiritual sensitivity can access ancestral memories through dreams. These memories, they claim, are not mere imaginings but actual experiences of past lives, preserved in what they call the Great River of Souls. Most intriguing is their belief that souls travel together across lifetimes, reconnecting in each new existence to complete unfinished spiritual business. Clara's hands trembled slightly. Harrington continued, "The ritual to awaken these memories typically involves sacred objects passed down through generations. I observed one such item, a medicine pouch containing herbs, crystals, and personal tokens. The medicine man explained that these objects serve as anchors, connecting the current life to past incarnations. A small illustration showed a leather pouch decorated with beadwork in a spiral pattern, the same spiral from Clara's dreams and Maca's paintings. As she turned the page, a folded paper fell from the binding. Opening it revealed handwritten notes in faded ink. April 17, 1852. Witnessed extraordinary demonstration today. Medicine man Swift Eagle and translator's daughter Elizabeth performed dreamwalking ritual. Both described identical scenes from purported shared past life with remarkable detail and consistency. Rational explanation eludes me. Require further investigation. Swift Eagle, the same man from Eleanor's photograph. And Elizabeth, Eleanor's grandmother. The connection was undeniable. Clara closed the book, mind racing. As she returned it to Mrs. Pearson, the older woman asked, "Did you find what you needed?" "I'm not certain," Clara answered honestly. Mrs. Pearson glanced around the empty library before speaking softly. "My mother knew your grandmother Mary before she left for the East. They shared certain experiences." Clara stared at the librarian. "You too. This land holds old memories, Miss Morrison. Some of us are more sensitive to them than others." She reached into her pocket, withdrawing a small leather pouch identical to the one illustrated in Harrington's book. "This belongs to you now. I can't accept." "It was your grandmother's," Mrs. Pearson interrupted. "She left it with my mother for safekeeping, saying someone from her line would return one day." Clara hesitantly took the pouch, its weight surprising her. Something inside shifted as she held it. "What does it contain?" "That's for you to discover," Mrs. Pearson replied. "But I recommend waiting until you're somewhere private. Dreams will come more strongly once you've opened it." As Clara left the library, sunlight struck her eyes with unusual intensity. The street below seemed to waver, buildings briefly appearing as they might have decades earlier. For a moment, she saw wagons instead of horses, canvas tents where permanent structures now stood. She blinked and the vision vanished. But as she descended the stairs, another flash hit her. This time not of the past, but something far more ancient. She gripped the railing as desert landscape replaced the town, and she saw herself dressed in Apache clothing, working alongside a man whose face was somehow both Makawa's and not. The vision lasted only seconds before reality reasserted itself, leaving Clara breathless on the town hall steps, the medicine pouch clutched tightly in her hand. That night, she placed the unopened pouch beside her bed, both eager and afraid to discover its contents. Her dreams, when they finally came, were more vivid than ever before. Clara arrived at Shadow Canyon just as the sun reached its zenith, casting minimal shadows in the rocky corridor. The medicine pouch hung at her waist, its presence a constant reminder of the mysteries unfolding around her. Last night's dreams had been overwhelming, vivid scenes of herself in Apache clothing, speaking a language she didn't understand yet somehow knew, living a life both foreign and hauntingly familiar. She found Maka not at his usual painting spot but deeper in the canyon, sitting cross-legged before a flat stone partially buried in the sandy ground. He looked up as she approached, his expression changing from meditation to recognition. "You've brought it," he said simply, eyes fixed on the medicine pouch. Clara stopped several paces away. "How did you know?" "I dreamed it would return today." He gestured for her to sit opposite him. "After 100 years." Clara remained standing. "I want answers, not mysticism. Eleanor claims we're related. Mrs. Pearson gave me this pouch, saying it belonged to my grandmother. Professor Harrington's journal mentions swift eagle and dream-walking rituals." She took a deep breath. "What is happening to me?" Maka studied her with patient eyes. "You've begun remembering. The dreams grow stronger, yes? And now waking visions too." Clara couldn't deny it. "That proves nothing except perhaps some form of hysteria." "Then why did you bring the pouch here?" Maka asked gently. The question struck home. Despite her protestations, Clara had been drawn to the canyon like a compass needle to north. "What is this stone?" she asked instead, nodding toward the flat rock between them. "The key to your questions." Maka brushed sand away from the stone's edge, revealing carved symbols matching those from her dreams. "Our people call it the speaking stone. It has been here for 20 generations." Clara knelt to examine it, scholarly curiosity temporarily overcoming her skepticism. The tablet was covered with symbols, spirals, stars, human figures, and animals, arranged in concentric circles around a central design. "These are the same images from my dreams," she whispered. "And your paintings." "Not dreams. Memories," Maka corrected. "The stone tells our story. Look closely at the center." Clara leaned forward. At the tablet's heart was a circular design with two human figures standing back to back, their hands intertwined. "The twin souls," Maka explained, "born in different worlds but bound through time. One from the people of the sunrise, one from the people of the sunset. In each cycle they return. And you believe we are these twin souls?" Clara couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "I know we are," Maka replied, "as did my great-grandfather Swift Eagle and your great-grandmother Elizabeth, as did their ancestors before them." Clara stood abruptly. "This is madness. We're strangers, not souls bound through time." "Are we strangers?" Maka rose fluidly. "Then how do I know that you have a small scar behind your right ear from falling against a hearthstone when you were 5? How do I know you cannot abide the taste of anise but love wild berries? How do I know that sometimes you wake crying from dreams you cannot remember?" Clara took a step back, shaken. These were details she had shared with no one in Whispering Creek. "You've been watching me," she accused. Maka shook his head. "I know because I have always known you, Clara, across many lifetimes." "Prove it," she challenged, clutching the medicine pouch. "If we're these twin souls, prove it in a way my rational mind cannot dismiss." "Open the pouch," Maka said quietly. Clara hesitated, then carefully untied the leather strings. Inside she found dried herbs, a small quartz crystal, and something wrapped in faded cloth. Unwrapping it revealed a perfectly preserved arrowhead of unusual blue-green stone. "Turquoise," Maka said. "Sacred stone of my people." Clara looked up to find him removing a leather cord from around his neck. Hanging from it was an identical arrowhead. "Impossible," she whispered. "They were one stone, split by lightning 400 years ago," Maka explained. "Since then, each half has passed through our respective bloodlines, waiting to be reunited." With trembling fingers, Clara held her arrowhead toward his. The edges aligned perfectly, two halves of a single whole. "This proves nothing," she insisted, even as certainty blossomed in her chest. "It could be an elaborate trick." "There is another way to know," Maka said, returning his arrowhead to his neck. "The ritual of remembering, but it requires your willing participation." A distant rumble of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. Maka tensed, listening. "Riders coming," he said. 3 men. Likely the marshal. Clara should have felt relief at the interruption. Instead, she felt frustration bordering on anger. "Tomorrow," she said decisively, "I'll return at dawn for this ritual." She retied the medicine pouch at her waist. "Bring whatever you need. I want to remember." Maka nodded solemnly. "Until tomorrow, then." He touched his arrowhead. "Keep yours close tonight. The dreams will show you more." As Clara hurried toward the canyon entrance, the matching arrowhead's significance weighed on her mind far more heavily than their physical presence around her neck. Dawn broke with golden fingers stretching across the eastern sky as Clara made her way to Shadow Canyon. She had barely slept, her dreams filled with fragmented scenes, unfamiliar landscapes, faces she somehow recognized, words in a language she'd never studied yet understood in the dream state. The turquoise arrowhead, now hanging from a ribbon around her neck, seemed to pulse with subtle warmth against her skin. Maka waited at the speaking stone, a small fire already burning. Beside him lay an intricately crafted fan of eagle feathers, their edges decorated with beadwork matching the spiral pattern from her dreams. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I need to know," Clara replied simply. Maka nodded. "The ritual allows shared vision, true memory, not dream. Can be overwhelming." "Are you certain?" Clara's education and Boston upbringing screamed caution, but something deeper, something that recognized the ancient tablet, the matching arrowheads, the impossible familiarity between them, urged her forward. "I'm certain." "Then sit," Maka instructed, gesturing to the space across the fire. "Hold your arrowhead in your right hand. When the time comes, we will touch them together." Clara followed his directions, settling onto the sun-warmed sand. Maka added sweet-smelling herbs to the fire, their smoke rising in a thin column before dispersing in the morning breeze. "Close your eyes," he said, lifting the feather fan. "Listen to my voice, but more importantly, listen to the voice of your blood. It remembers what your mind has forgotten." Clara closed her eyes, feeling slightly foolish yet undeniably expectant. Maka began a low chant, the words unfamiliar yet stirring something deep within her. The feather fan moved through the fragrant smoke, directing it toward her. "Breathe deeply," Maka instructed between verses. "The smoke carries memories." Clara inhaled, expecting to cough, but the smoke entered her lungs with surprising sweetness. Behind her closed eyelids, patterns began to form, at first just swirling colors, then gradually shaping into images. "Now," Maka said, his voice sounding distant, "join the stones." Clara extended her hand, the arrowhead resting on her palm. Through slitted eyes, she watched Maka place his matching piece against hers. When the ancient fragments touched, the world around her dissolved. She stood in a clearing surrounded by juniper trees, wearing a dress of soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork. Her hands, darker than Clara's own, worked nimbly, preparing medicinal herbs. Around her, An Apache encampment bustled with activity, women tanning hides, men crafting weapons, children playing games with marked stones. Escalating, a voice called, a name meaning monster slayer, in the Apache tongue. Though Clara somehow understood this without translation, she looked up to see a tall man approaching Maka, yet not Maka. His face bore similar features but different scars, his bearing that of a respected medicine man. "The traders come from the south," he said in Apache, words Clara understood perfectly within the vision. "The Spanish bring metal tools to trade." She felt herself nod, felt the wariness in her own response. "And their black-robed priests come with them, speaking of their one god." The scene shifted. Night now, the same clearing illuminated by firelight. Elders gathered in a circle around the central fire, and she sat beside the medicine man, both of them respected healers of the band. An elder spoke of troubling dreams, pale men coming in greater numbers, bringing sickness and conflict. The medicine man, her partner in this life, held up a complete turquoise arrowhead, speaking words of power. "When darkness comes, we will hide our knowledge in stone and bone and memory. Our spirits will return when the circle completes." Lightning split the sky directly overhead, striking the ground before them. When the blinding light faded, the turquoise arrowhead had split perfectly in two. The assembled tribe gasped at the omen. "It is decided," the eldest grandmother proclaimed. "The twin souls will carry the halves through time, to be reunited when our people most need remembering." Clara gasped as the vision released her, finding herself back in the present, sweat-drenched and trembling. The arrowhead in her palm burned hot against her skin. Across the fire, Maka watched her with knowing eyes. "You saw," he said. "It wasn't a question. I was her, an Apache healer." Clara struggled to reconcile the vivid memory with her present identity. It was 300 years ago. The Spanish were trading in the territory. Maka nodded. "We were healers together, protecting our people's knowledge through a time of change." "But I'm not Apache," Clara protested, though with less conviction than before. "I'm from Boston, from a respectable family." "In this life," Maka agreed. "But souls choose different vessels in each journey. The blood you carry now has mixed with other rivers, but part of it flows from that woman you just remembered." Clara stared at the arrowhead in her palm. It was whole then. The lightning strike. "A sign," Maka confirmed, "that our souls would separate but eventually reunite." Hoofbeats echoed suddenly through the canyon, much closer than before. Maka quickly extinguished the fire. "Someone comes," he said, gathering the ritual items. "The marshal by the sound." Clara rose shakily to her feet, still disoriented from the vision. "I need time to understand what I saw." Maka pressed the feather fan into her hands. "Keep this, and return tomorrow if you can. There is more to remember, and little time remaining." "Why little time?" "The cycle completes in 7 days," Maka said urgently. "The 100th year since the last awakening. We must finish what was started then." Before Clara could ask what he meant, Marshal Rutledge's voice echoed through the canyon. "Miss Morrison? Are you in there?" Clara hurriedly tucked the feather fan into her shawl and moved toward the canyon entrance, her mind still reeling from the vision. Marshal Rutledge appeared around a bend in the path, his expression hardening when he spotted her. "Miss Morrison." He touched the brim of his hat in formal greeting, eyes scanning the area behind her. "Awful early for a nature walk." "The canyon is peaceful at dawn," Clara replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "I find it helps clear my thoughts before teaching." The marshal's gaze dropped to her neck, where the turquoise arrowhead hung visible against her blouse. "Interesting trinket. Local, is it?" Clara's hand instinctively covered the arrowhead. "A family heirloom. Peculiar for a Boston family to have Apache jewelry." Rutledge removed his hat, revealing graying hair damp with sweat. I've been meaning to ask why the schoolteacher keeps visiting this particular canyon, especially when we've had reports of an Apache man frequenting the area. I wasn't aware my movements were being monitored, Marshall. Clara straightened her spine, channeling the proper Bostonian lady her parents had raised. Small town, Miss Morrison. People notice things. He stepped closer. Like how you've been distracted at school. How you leave town almost daily. How you spoke against Apache removal at the council meeting. I believe in justice, Marshall, not prejudice. Rutledge's weathered face tightened. Justice? My brother was scalped by Apache raiders in '68. That's the justice they understand. He gestured toward the canyon. You meeting someone back there? I was alone, Clara lied, hating the necessity but knowing the truth would only endanger Maka. The marshal pulled a small notebook from his pocket, his official log. Deputy Collins spotted you speaking with a half-breed called Blackwood 2 days ago. Same man suspected of killing Hernandez's cattle. That's ridiculous. He's a peaceful man. Rutledge's eyebrows rose. So you admit knowing him? Clara realized her mistake too late. We've spoken briefly. He's educated. Hardly the savage you're describing. Those are the most dangerous kind, Rutledge said, writing in his notebook. They learn our ways, use our words, then turn against us. Is that what this is about? Clara asked. You're using cattle theft as an excuse to drive away people who don't fit your idea of who belongs here? The marshal closed his notebook with a snap. I'm protecting this town, Miss Morrison. Something you might consider before forming inappropriate associations. He replaced his hat. I'll escort you back to town. That's not necessary. I insist. His tone left no room for argument. As they walked in tense silence, Clara felt the weight of the feather fan hidden in her shawl, the heat of the arrowhead against her skin, physical connections to a past she was only beginning to understand. In town, people stopped to stare as the marshal walked her to the schoolhouse. Mrs. Peterson, mother of 2 of Clara's students, quickly ushered her children to the other side of the street. Mr. Wilson, the banker, watched from his doorway with obvious disapproval. Seems folks are already talking, Rutledge observed with grim satisfaction. At the schoolhouse, Clara found a small group of parents waiting, Eleanor Jenkins among them. The widow gave her a warning look that Clara couldn't interpret. Miss Morrison, Mr. Williams stepped forward, his daughter Sarah hiding behind his legs. We've come to discuss some concerns. Can it wait until after school? Clara asked, uncomfortably aware of the ritual items concealed in her clothing. That's what we're here to discuss, Williams continued. Some of us are concerned about influences on our children. What influences? Mrs. Peterson spoke up. Tommy Jenkins has been drawing heathen symbols. Says you showed interest in them. All eyes turned to Eleanor, who met their gazes calmly. My son has an active imagination. And Sarah came home asking if people come back after they die, Mrs. Williams added. Says you've been distracted, talking about dreams and visions. Clara felt a chill. I've done no such thing. Marshal Rutledge cleared his throat. There's also the matter of your frequent visits to Shadow Canyon, where that half-breed Blackwood has been seen. A murmur ran through the gathered parents. Clara recognized the dangerous momentum building. My personal time is my own, she said firmly, and my teaching has always been exemplary. No one questions your teaching ability, Williams clarified. It's your associations that concern us. From her dress pocket, Mrs. Peterson produced a folded paper. This was found behind the schoolhouse yesterday. Clara's heart sank as the woman unfolded a page torn from her dream journal. A detailed drawing of the spiral symbol alongside Apache words she transcribed from her dreams. Care to explain this witchcraft? Mrs. Peterson demanded. Before Clara could answer, Eleanor stepped forward. It's getting late. The children should start their lessons. We're not finished here, Williams protested. But you are, Eleanor said with surprising authority. The school board meets Friday. Bring your concerns then, formally. Reluctantly, the parents dispersed, leaving their children for the day's lessons. As they filed into the schoolhouse, Eleanor gripped Clara's arm. Be careful, she whispered. Someone searched your cabin yesterday. This is moving faster than I expected. How do you know? Tonight, after dark, come to the store. Bring the fan and arrowhead. Eleanor squeezed her arm once more before departing. Inside the empty classroom, Clara found another torn page from her journal pinned to her desk with a knife. Clara dismissed her students early, claiming a headache. The torn journal page, pinned to her desk with a hunting knife, had shaken her more than she cared to admit. The message was clear. Someone in Whispering Creek saw her as a threat. Rather than returning to her vulnerable cabin, Clara hitched the school's wagon and drove to Copper Springs, the county seat 15 miles west. If answers lay in the past, perhaps official records would provide them. The county courthouse stood proud in Copper Springs Town Square, its brick facade a sharp contrast to Whispering Creek's wooden structures. Inside, a clerk directed Clara to the basement archives. County records go back to territorial days, the young man explained, lighting a lamp for her. What exactly are you seeking? Information about Shadow Canyon and early settlements in the Whispering Creek area, Clara replied, particularly any incidents involving Apache peoples. The clerk's expression darkened. You'll want the 1783 records, then. The Shadow Canyon Massacre. Massacre! The word sent a chill through Clara. The clerk pulled a leather-bound volume from the shelves. Not something folks talk about much anymore. Happened before proper government was established out here. Clara opened the brittle pages carefully. The handwriting was faded but legible. Official statements from settlers compiled years after the events they described. As she read, a horrifying picture emerged. In 1783, a band of Apache had been living peacefully near Shadow Canyon. When silver was discovered in the canyon, settlers formed a militia. Under cover of darkness, they attacked the Apache camp, killing men, women, and children. Only a handful escaped into the mountains. Clara's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The massacre date, June 21, 1783, appeared repeatedly in her dreams as carved figures in stone. Almost exactly 100 years ago. Find what you're looking for? The clerk had returned. Yes, thank you. Clara hesitated. Do you know if anyone survived? Any descendants of those Apache still in the area? The clerk shrugged. There's an old woman works at the library upstairs. Miss Begay. Been here forever. Has some Apache blood, I think. Might know more. In the small library above the courthouse, Clara found an elderly woman with silver hair and piercing dark eyes organizing periodicals. Despite her advanced years, she moved with surprising grace. Miss Begay? Clara approached cautiously. I'm researching the history of Shadow Canyon. The clerk thought you might help. The woman studied Clara intently before responding. What's your interest in Old Sorrow's schoolteacher? Clara touched the arrowhead beneath her collar. I've been having dreams about the canyon, and I found someone painting images from my dreams on the canyon walls. Miss Begay's eyes widened slightly. You've met the painter. Yes. His name is Maka, or Thomas Blackwood. The librarian motioned Clara to follow her into a private reading room. Once the door closed, she spoke in a low voice. The dreams came at 30, yes? And now you seek answers in dusty records. Clara stared. How could you know that? Because it's happened before. Miss Begay reached for a book on a high shelf, revealing a leather cord around her neck, bearing a stone pendant carved with the spiral symbol. My grandmother was keeper of stories. She told of souls bound to the land, returning when the great wrong must be healed. The massacre, Clara whispered. Miss Begay nodded. Not just people died that day. Something sacred was broken. She removed a slim volume from the shelf, not an official record but a handwritten journal. This belonged to a settler woman named Elizabeth Jenkins. She left it here for safekeeping in 1823. Eleanor's grandmother, Clara, accepted the journal with reverent hands. She wrote of strange dreams that began on her 30th birthday, Miss Begay continued. Dreams of lives she'd never lived, and of a man named Swift Eagle who shared those dreams. Clara opened the journal to find handwriting eerily similar to her own, describing the same symbols, the same landscapes, the same sense of urgent purpose that haunted her own dreams. It says they performed a ritual in the canyon, Clara murmured, scanning the pages. But it was interrupted. They were discovered. The canyon was declared forbidden to settlers after a rockslide killed several men, Miss Begay confirmed. Some said Elizabeth's witchcraft caused it, but others whispered the land itself had risen against those who profaned it. And 100 years before that, in 1783, Miss Begay's expression grew solemn. The massacre occurred when two souls, one Apache, one settler, attempted a healing ritual. They died with their work unfinished. She fixed Clara with an intense gaze. The land remembers. Every 100 years, it calls back those souls to complete what was started. Maka said we have 7 days, Clara whispered, before the cycle completes. The summer solstice, Miss Begay nodded. When the veil between times grows thinnest. She placed a gnarled hand over Clara's. Listen carefully, teacher. What was broken must be mended, but forces will align against you, just as they did before. What happens if we fail? The cycle continues. More pain, more forgetting. Miss Begay's voice softened. And the land's anger grows. You felt it already, objects moving, visions bleeding through. The barrier weakens. Clara clutched Elizabeth's journal to her chest. I need to understand what the ritual requires. The answers lie in your blood memory, Miss Begay replied, and in the speaking stone. But beware, the ones who fear the old ways will try to stop you. They always do. As Clara left Copper Springs, Elizabeth's journal hidden safely in her satchel, the setting sun cast long shadows across the road ahead. The 100-year cycle, the interrupted ritual, the souls called back. Pieces of a cosmic puzzle were falling into place, revealing a destiny both terrifying and strangely inevitable. Night had fallen by the time Clara returned to Whispering Creek. Instead of heading to her cabin, she went directly to Eleanor's store as arranged. The windows were dark, but a soft glow emanated from the back room. Clara knocked gently on the rear door. Eleanor opened it immediately, as if she'd been waiting just on the other side. Quickly, she whispered, ushering Clara inside. The back room had been transformed. Eleanor had pushed the furniture aside, creating an open space where a small fire burned in a cast-iron bowl. The familiar scent of sage and cedar filled the air. You found Elizabeth's journal, Eleanor said, gesturing to Clara's satchel. How did you? I knew you'd seek answers in Copper Springs. Eleanor took the journal reverently. My grandmother's words, returned after all these years. Clara removed her shawl, revealing the feather fan and arrowhead. Miss Begay told me about the 100-year cycle, about souls returning to heal what was broken. Eleanor nodded. Each generation, the dreaming comes to those with the old blood, usually at 30 years, when the soul has matured enough to remember. But why me? I'm from Boston. Your grandmother Mary was my mother's sister, Eleanor reminded her. When she left after the tragedy of 1823, she carried the blood memories with her. They passed to your father, then to you, diluted perhaps, but still potent. A soft knock interrupted them. Eleanor opened the door to admit Tommy, her son, carrying a bundle wrapped in deerskin. As I asked, she told the boy, who handed the package to Clara. It was under the floorboards in our old cabin, Tommy explained. Ma said it's been waiting for you. Clara unwrapped the bundle to find a second turquoise arrowhead, identical to hers but with a different leather cord. "I don't understand," she said. "I already have an arrowhead." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You found one? Where?" "In the medicine pouch Mrs. Pearson gave me." Eleanor exchanged a significant look with Tommy. "Then the third has revealed itself." The circle gathers. Before Clara could question this, another knock came at the door. This time, Eleanor checked through a small window before opening it. Maka entered silently, ducking his tall frame beneath the low doorway. His eyes immediately found Clara's, a connection between them seeming to vibrate in the air. "You went to Copper Springs," he said without preamble. Clara nodded. "I found records of the massacre, and Elizabeth's journal. And I see Tommy brought the second arrowhead," Maka added, his gaze falling to the newly unwrapped stone in Clara's hand. "Second." Clara held up both arrowheads. "I thought there were only two halves." "The original stone split into three during the lightning strike," Maka explained. "Two larger pieces and a smaller one. The third has been lost for generations." Clara removed her arrowhead from around her neck, holding both pieces toward Maka's. "These fit together?" Maka withdrew his arrowhead from beneath his shirt. In the firelight, all three stones seemed to glow with inner light. "Together, they form the key," he said solemnly. Eleanor stepped forward. "We should complete the second remembering while we have this chance. Time grows short." "Remembering?" Clara asked. "The ritual we began in the canyon," Maka explained. "Each remembering reveals more of our shared past, and what we must do to heal the break." Tommy moved to stand lookout at the window while Eleanor added herbs to the fire. Clara and Maka sat cross-legged on either side of the flames, the three arrowheads placed between them. "Focus on the stones," Maka instructed Clara. "Remember how it felt in the canyon, the barrier thinning between now and then." Clara fixed her gaze on the glowing turquoise, allowing her breath to synchronize with Maka's. The room around her began to fade. Rain pelted down in sheets, turning the desert ground to mud. No, not Clara in this memory, but a woman named Hannah, hurried through the downpour toward a small cabin set apart from the main settlement. The year was 1823, and Whispering Creek existed as little more than a trading post and a few scattered homesteads. Inside the cabin, a tall man with copper skin and dark eyes tended a woman in childbirth. Swift Eagle, the medicine man, worked with focused concentration despite the hostile community surrounding them. "Elizabeth is fading," he said gravely. "The baby comes wrong." Hannah, the midwife and Swift Eagle's secret ally, saw the truth in Elizabeth's gray face. "We must try the old ways." Swift Eagle nodded, withdrawing two turquoise arrowheads from a pouch. "The stones, remember, they may give her strength." Together, they placed the stones in Elizabeth's hands. A strange light filled the cabin as the stones began to glow. Elizabeth's breathing strengthened, and within moments, her baby, a healthy girl, slid into the world. Outside, men's voices called in anger. The cabin door splintered under an axe blow. "They're coming for you," Hannah told Swift Eagle urgently. "Take the back trail into the canyon." "The ritual remains unfinished," Swift Eagle protested. "The land's wounds still bleed." "The child will carry on," Hannah promised. "She bears both bloodlines now. Go." As Swift Eagle vanished into the night, townsmen burst in, led by Hannah's own husband. The turquoise stones, still glowing with mysterious light, caught their attention. "Witchcraft!" someone shouted. Hannah felt herself lift the newborn infant protectively. "This is Elizabeth's daughter. There's no witchcraft here, only a difficult birth." But the men had seen the glowing stones, had witnessed something beyond their understanding. And fear always bred violence. Clara gasped as the vision released her, tears streaming down her face. Across the fire, Maka's expression mirrored her pain. "We were there," she whispered. "I was the midwife, Hannah. You were Swift Eagle. And Eleanor's grandmother was Elizabeth," Maka confirmed. "She survived, but Swift Eagle was hunted into the canyon, where he died in a rockslide," Eleanor added quietly. A rockslide many believed was no accident, but the land itself protecting its secrets. Clara looked down at the arrowheads, still glowing faintly in the firelight. "And the baby?" "Elizabeth's daughter." "My mother," Eleanor said. "And yours was her sister, born 3 years later, but carrying the same mixed blood." A sudden crash from the front of the store shattered the moment. "Hide!" Eleanor hissed, quickly gathering the ritual items. Maka extinguished the fire while Tommy pulled up a floorboard, revealing a small storage space. Maka slipped inside just as heavy footsteps approached the back room. The door burst open. Marshal Rutledge stood in the doorway, flanked by Deputies Collins and Hayes. "Evening, ladies," Rutledge said, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "Quite a gathering." "This is my home, Marshal," Eleanor replied calmly. "What brings you breaking down my door at this hour?" Rutledge's gaze moved from Eleanor to Clara, then to Tommy. "Interesting company you keep, Mrs. Jenkins." He turned to his deputies. "Search the place." "You have no right," Eleanor began. "I have every right when there's suspected illegal activity," Rutledge interrupted. "Got a report of an Indian man entering your store after hours." Clara stepped forward. "I came to visit my friend. There's no one else here." Rutledge's eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind us looking around." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and thrust it at Clara. "This was posted on the church door tonight." Clara unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a page from her dream journal, the one with detailed drawings of Apache symbols and notes about her recurring visions. Across the top, someone had scrawled in red ink, "Witchcraft and Indians sympathizing in our school." "Where did you get this?" Clara demanded. "Someone's concerned about Whispering Creek's moral character," Rutledge replied, "and about what's being taught to our children." Deputy Hayes emerged from the storeroom. "No one there, Marshal." Rutledge looked disappointed but not deterred. "Miss Morrison, the school board wants to see you first thing tomorrow. Your extracurricular activities have raised serious concerns." "My personal beliefs are my own affair," Clara said firmly. "Not when you're responsible for children's minds." Rutledge gestured to the journal page. "This heathen nonsense has no place in our community." Eleanor stepped beside Clara. "The board can discuss this properly tomorrow. For now, I think you've overstepped, Marshal." Rutledge's jaw tightened. "We'll go, Mrs. Jenkins, but consider your associations carefully. Harboring Indians or their sympathizers won't be tolerated much longer." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Ladies." After they departed, Eleanor bolted the door and helped Maka from his hiding place. "It's begun," Maka said grimly. "Just as it did before." Eleanor nodded. "The timing matches the pattern. 5 days before solstice, fear spreads through the town." "Someone took my journal," Clara said, still holding the torn page. "Someone's been in my home." "You can't go back there," Eleanor decided. "It's not safe." "But where?" "You'll stay with me," Eleanor said. "Tommy can sleep in the storeroom." Maka gathered his few belongings. "I should leave. My presence endangers you all." "No," Clara surprised herself with the vehemence in her voice. "We need to complete the remembering. Miss Begay said we have until the solstice to heal what was broken." "The Marshal is watching both of you now," Eleanor warned. "Meeting will be nearly impossible." Tommy, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "The old mine shaft. No one goes there." Eleanor considered this. "The abandoned silver mine in the North Canyon? It might work. It's connected to Shadow Canyon by tunnels the old miners dug." "I know the place," Maka nodded. "Tomorrow at sunset?" Clara agreed, though dread pooled in her stomach. What will happen at the school board meeting? Nothing good, Eleanor sighed. They've been looking for an excuse to remove you since you spoke against Apache removal. I could deny everything, Clara suggested half-heartedly. Say the journal was fabricated. Mako's dark eyes met hers. Would denying what you know to be true honor the path your soul has walked? The question struck Clara deeply. Throughout her life, she had valued truth, even when inconvenient. The thought of denying her experiences, her dreams, her growing certainty about her connection to Maka felt like a betrayal of something fundamental. No, she admitted. I can't deny what I've seen, what I remember. Then stand in your truth, Maka said simply. Whatever comes. He slipped out the back door into the darkness, leaving Clara to contemplate what awaited her the next day. Morning brought a crowd outside the schoolhouse. Parents, shopkeepers, ranchers. It seemed all of Whispering Creek had gathered. As Clara approached, conversations hushed, replaced by hostile stares and whispered comments. On the schoolhouse door hung multiple pages from her journal, including deeply personal entries about her dreams and the strange connection she felt to Maka. Someone had circled every mention of Apache beliefs or symbols in red ink. Reverend Phillips stood on the schoolhouse steps with the school board members, his expression grave. Miss Morrison, the board has called an emergency session regarding your position. I see you've already conducted a trial. By public opinion, Clara observed, looking at her private thoughts displayed for all to see. Williams stepped forward. These writings describe pagan rituals and inappropriate relations with an Indian. Do you deny they're yours? Clara felt dozens of eyes upon her, judging, condemning. Her teaching career, the work she'd dedicated her life to, hung in the balance. Yet the memory of Hannah the midwife, of the Apache healer she'd once been, of lives spent protecting sacred knowledge filled her with unexpected strength. The journal is mine, she said clearly, and I stand by every word. A gasp rippled through the crowd. On the edge of the gathering, Eleanor watched with proud, sad eyes. Then you leave us no choice, Williams announced. By unanimous vote, you are relieved of your position, effective immediately. Clara stood motionless as the crowd dispersed, leaving her alone on the schoolhouse steps. After 5 years of dedicated teaching, her dismissal had taken less than 5 minutes. She gathered what personal belongings she could carry from her desk, including a few books and her pointer, painfully aware that someone had already ransacked her materials, looking for more evidence of witchcraft. She spent the day in Eleanor's back room, mourning not just her lost position, but the shattering of her carefully constructed life. By late afternoon, her grief had hardened into resolve. If standing in her truth had cost her this life, perhaps it was because another, older purpose awaited. At sunset, Clara slipped out of town using back alleys, the medicine pouch and arrowheads secure in her pocket. The abandoned mine entrance gaped like a wound in the northern canyon wall, its timbers weathered and sagging. A chill emanated from the dark opening, carrying the musty scent of earth and old metal. Maka? She called softly, her voice echoing in the silence. A match flared in the darkness, illuminating Maka's face as he lit a small lantern. This way, he said, gesturing deeper into the mine. Stay close. The tunnels can be confusing. They moved through the abandoned workings, past rusted tools and forgotten carts. The main shaft soon branched into narrower passages, some barely wide enough for Mako's shoulders. The miners broke through to natural caves, he explained, ducking beneath a low ceiling. They found silver, but also things they didn't understand. Things that frightened them. What things? Clara asked, keeping close behind him. Paintings, burial sites, signs of ceremonies performed long before Europeans arrived. The passage widened suddenly into a larger chamber. The mine was abandoned when too many accidents occurred. The miners believed the place was cursed. Or protected, Clara suggested. Maka's smile flashed in the lantern light. You begin to understand. They continued through a narrow crevice that connected the mine workings to a natural cave system. The air changed, becoming cooler but somehow less oppressive, carrying a faint scent of water and mineral. We're beneath Shadow Canyon now, Maka said, the sacred heart of this land. The passage opened into a high-ceiling chamber where a small underground spring created a clear pool. The lantern light reflected off the water, sending dancing patterns across walls covered in ancient paintings. Clara gasped. The entire chamber was a canvas of ochre, white, and black pigments depicting human figures, animals, and the now familiar symbols from her dreams. The spiral motif appeared repeatedly, connecting different scenes in a continuous story. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's our history, Maka said, raising the lantern higher. The complete story of the twin souls and their purpose. Clara moved closer to the wall, studying the images. On one section, two figures stood back to back within a spiral, their hands reaching toward different groups of people. The first twin souls, Maka explained. One from the people of the sunrise, one from the people of the sunset, bound together to maintain balance between worlds. The narrative continued around the chamber. Clara followed it, seeing the twin souls reappear in different scenes, sometimes as men, sometimes as women, sometimes one of each, but always recognizable by the spiral connecting them. Each cycle they return, Maka continued, when the land calls for healing, when balance must be restored. Clara stopped before a disturbing image, figures lying dead while the ground beneath them cracked open. Above them, the spiral symbol appeared broken. The massacre, she whispered. Maka nodded solemnly. 100 years ago, when silver was discovered, the twin souls, then an Apache man and a settler woman, tried to perform the healing ritual. They were killed before it could be completed. And in 1823, Swift Eagle and Hannah interrupted again. Swift Eagle died in the canyon, and Hannah was driven from the territory. Maka touched the painted wall gently. The cycle continues until the ritual is completed. The land's wound deepens with each failure. What is this wound we're supposed to heal? Clara asked. Maka led her to the chamber's center where a flat stone altar stood beside the spring. Long ago, when different peoples first encountered each other on this land, fear led to bloodshed. The natural order was broken. He pointed to a painting showing the land itself bleeding. The twin souls emerged then, one from each people to restore harmony. And they've been trying ever since, Clara realized. Every 100 years, when the veil thins. Yes, but each failure makes the next attempt more difficult. The land's patience wears thin. Maka set the lantern on the altar, revealing a small clay bowl worn smooth by countless hands. This belonged to the original twin souls. It has been preserved for generations, waiting for the ritual to be completed. Clara touched the bowl reverently. What exactly is the ritual? A ceremony of remembrance and reconciliation. It requires the 3 arrowhead pieces united, water from this spring, and blood freely given from both twin souls. Maka's eyes met hers in the flickering light. We must stand together at the speaking stone in Shadow Canyon at sunrise on the solstice. That's the day after tomorrow, Clara said. Yes, and this time we must succeed. Maka's expression grew grave. Feel the earth around us, Clara. Listen. She closed her eyes, extending her awareness as she'd learned to do during their shared visions. A subtle vibration hummed through the stone beneath her feet, not peaceful but agitated, like a living thing in pain. The land itself is awakening, Maka said softly. Objects moving in your home, visions coming unbidden. These are just the beginning. If we fail again, what happens? The balance cannot be restored, and the wound tears open completely. His voice dropped to a whisper. The land remembers, and its anger, is terrible. A distant rumble, like faraway thunder but coming from beneath them, punctuated his words with ominous timing. Clara and Maka emerged from the cave system through a narrow opening in Shadow Canyon, far from the main entrance where the marshal might post guards. The night sky stretched above them, stars brilliant in the clear desert air. "We should separate," Maka suggested. "Meet at dawn tomorrow to prepare for the ritual." Clara nodded reluctantly. "I'll stay with Eleanor tonight." They parted ways, Clara retracing the path toward town, while Maka disappeared into the deeper recesses of the canyon. The weight of their discovery, the ancient paintings, the story of the twin souls, the urgency of their task, pressed upon her with each step. As she approached the edge of town, Clara sensed something wrong. Too many lights burned for this late hour. Voices carried on the night air, men talking, horses nickering. She slowed, taking cover behind a stand of juniper trees. A posse had gathered in the street outside the marshal's office, at least a dozen men with rifles and lanterns. Marshal Rutledge stood on the boardwalk addressing them. "Blackwood's been spotted in Shadow Canyon," he announced. "Williams reported smoke from a campfire near the speaking stone. We ride within the hour." "What about the schoolteacher?" someone called. "My deputies are watching the Jenkins place," Rutledge answered. "If Morrison shows her face, we'll detain her for questioning. Remember, I want Blackwood alive if possible. There are laws even for his kind." The crowd muttered in disappointment. Clara's blood ran cold as she realized their intent. Not just to arrest Maka, but something far darker. The patterns of the past were reasserting themselves, the same fear and prejudice that had interrupted the ritual twice before. She backed away carefully, circling toward Eleanor's store using back alleys. As Rutledge had promised, a deputy sat on horseback watching the rear entrance. Clara waited patiently until he dismounted to stretch his legs, then darted across the open space to the root cellar doors Eleanor never locked. Minutes later, she emerged from the cellar into Eleanor's kitchen. The widow jumped, nearly dropping the cup she held. "Clara! Thank God!" Eleanor embraced her quickly. "Rutledge's men have been watching the house. Tommy spotted a posse forming. They're going after Maka," Clara confirmed. "Tonight." Eleanor's face paled. "Then the pattern repeats, just like before." "Not this time," Clara said with sudden resolve. "We need to warn him. The deputy will follow me when I leave, giving you a chance to reach the canyon by the northern path." Clara removed the medicine pouch and 2 arrowheads from her pocket. "Take these to Maka. Tell him to wait for me at the speaking stone at dawn." "What are you going to do?" Eleanor asked, accepting the sacred items. "Create a diversion," Clara replied. "Then follow as soon as I can." Before Eleanor could protest, Clara slipped back out through the cellar. She deliberately made noise emerging from the alley, drawing the deputy's attention. "Miss Morrison," he called, remounting quickly. "Marshal wants a word with you." Clara ran, not toward the canyon but toward the schoolhouse. The deputy followed, just as she'd intended, blowing his whistle to signal others. Clara ducked around the schoolhouse and through the playground, leading her pursuers on a winding chase through town. By the time the deputy cornered her behind the livery stable, Eleanor would be well on her way to warn Maka. "That's far enough, Miss Morrison," Deputy Collins said, breathing heavily as he blocked her path, his hand on his holstered pistol. "Marshal says you're to come in for questioning." "About what crime, deputy?" Clara asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Harboring a fugitive, for starters." Collins gestured with his free hand. "Don't make this difficult." Clara considered her options. Being detained might actually prove useful. It would keep the marshal's attention on her rather than the canyon until Eleanor reached Maka. "Very well," she said, allowing the deputy to escort her to the jailhouse. Marshal Rutledge looked up in surprise when Collins led her in. He dismissed his deputy with a nod. "Miss Morrison, convenient timing." Rutledge removed his hat, revealing thinning hair slicked with sweat. I was just about to lead a patrol to Shadow Canyon. Looking for Thomas Blackwood? Clara asked innocently. Rutledge's eyes narrowed. Among other things, you wouldn't happen to know his whereabouts. I haven't seen him since you interrupted our conversation in the canyon days ago. The marshal leaned forward, resting his hands on his desk where a loaded rifle lay within easy reach. I don't believe you, Miss Morrison. Not after reading your journal entries. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks at the invasion of her privacy. Those were personal writings. They're evidence now. Rutledge tapped a folder on his desk. Evidence of conspiracy with an Indian fugitive. Possibly even accessory to cattle theft. That's absurd. Is it? The marshal picked up his rifle, checking its loading mechanism. Strange things have been happening since you started visiting that canyon. Livestock disappearing. Ground tremors. William's well went dry overnight. His weathered face hardened. Old-timers say it's like '83 all over again. Right before the massacre. Clara felt a chill at his words. The land's distress was manifesting in ways the townspeople interpreted as threats. History doesn't have to repeat itself, she said carefully. That's exactly my intention, Rutledge replied, rising from his desk. We're going to make sure no Apache troublemaker stirs up the past. He gestured to a cell. You'll wait here while we bring in your friend. What do you intend to do with him? Clara asked, fear creeping into her voice. Rutledge's expression remained impassive. Uphold the law, Miss Morrison. One way or another. The loaded rifle in his hands told a different story. Hours passed in the small jail cell. Clara sat on the hard bench, listening to the occasional sounds from outside. Horses departing, men's voices, the town settling into uneasy sleep. Deputy Hayes kept watch, nodding off in his chair only to jerk awake at the slightest noise. Near midnight, the ground trembled subtly beneath them. Hayes straightened, looking around nervously. Another tremor, he muttered. Third one today. Clara felt it differently. Not just physical movement but something deeper, like the land itself drawing breath. The cycle was accelerating toward its climax, whether she was free to participate or not. A soft knock at the jailhouse door roused Hayes from his vigil. He opened it cautiously to reveal Tommy Jenkins. Deputy Ma says to come quick, the boy said breathlessly. Our store's being robbed. Hayes hesitated, glancing back at Clara. I can't leave the prisoner. Ma said they got guns, Tommy insisted. Please, sir. The deputy's sense of duty warred visibly with concern for a widow and her son. I'll lock up and be right there, he decided, reaching for his keys. As soon as Hayes departed, Tommy produced a key from his pocket and unlocked Clara's cell. Eleanor sent you? Clara asked, hurrying out. Tommy nodded. Ma's with Mr. Blackwood in the canyon. The posse didn't find him, but they're still searching. He handed her a small bundle. She said you'd need these. Inside the bundle, Clara found the clay bowl from the cave and a small knife with a bone handle. Thank you, Tommy, she said, touching his shoulder gratefully. Now go home before Hayes realizes he's been tricked. Clara slipped out the back door of the jailhouse and made her way to the edge of town. The night had grown unnaturally still. No wind, no animal sounds, as if the natural world held its breath in anticipation. The eastern sky showed the first hint of pre-dawn light as Clara reached Shadow Canyon. She moved cautiously, aware that Rutledge's men might still be searching the area. The speaking stone lay in the deepest part of the canyon, accessible by a narrow path between towering rock walls. As she rounded the final bend, Clara found Eleanor keeping watch while Maka prepared the ritual site. A small fire burned beside the speaking stone, illuminating the ancient symbols carved into its surface. Clara! Eleanor rushed forward to embrace her. We feared you wouldn't escape in time. Tommy proved quite the accomplice. Clara smiled briefly before turning serious. Has there been any sign of the marshal? His men searched the outer canyon but didn't find this place, Maka replied, rising from his preparations. They've split into smaller groups to continue searching. Then we have little time. Clara removed the clay bowl and knife from her bundle. The ritual? Maka nodded, taking the items reverently. Almost ready. We need water from the sacred spring. Eleanor produced a small water skin. I collected it from the cave pool. As they assembled the ritual elements, Clara felt the ground tremble again. Stronger this time. A distant rumble echoed through the canyon, and small stones skittered down the walls around them. The land grows impatient, Maka said, his expression grave. We must begin. He placed the clay bowl on the speaking stone, pouring the spring water into it. Around the stone, he had arranged a circle of sage, cedar, and juniper, plants sacred to both their traditions. The 3 turquoise arrowheads lay side by side, waiting to be united. What do we do? Clara asked, moving to stand opposite Maka across the stone. Join hands, he instructed. Eleanor took position at the 3rd point of their triangle. We are the circle now. Past, present, and future. Clara extended her hands, clasping Maka's warm grip on one side and Eleanor's on the other. The connection sent a jolt through her body, as if completing an electrical circuit. Maka began to chant in Apache, words that Clara somehow understood without translation. An invocation to the land, to the ancestors, to the spirits that maintained balance between worlds. Eleanor joined in, adding phrases Clara recognized from Elizabeth's journal. The arrowheads began to glow with inner light, just as they had in Clara's vision of Swift Eagle and Hannah. The water in the clay bowl rippled without being touched. Now, Maka said, shifting to English, we must offer blood freely given, the blood of both twin souls to heal the ancient wound. He took the bone-handled knife, drawing it gently across his palm. Red droplets fell into the bowl, sending ripples across the water's surface. He passed the knife to Clara. She hesitated only briefly before drawing the blade across her own palm. The pain was sharp but clean, her blood joining Maka's in the ancient vessel. The moment her blood touched the water, the world around them seemed to shift. The canyon walls became transparent, revealing layer upon layer of time, the same location throughout centuries. Clara saw Shadow Canyon as it had been before White Settlement, when Apache ceremonies honored the land's spirit. She saw the first violent encounter between peoples, felt the land's pain as blood soaked into soil. She witnessed the failed attempts at healing across generations, always interrupted, always ending in tragedy. The arrowheads, Maka prompted. With bloodied hands, they each took their pieces of the turquoise stone, holding them above the bowl. As the first ray of solstice sunrise pierced the canyon, they brought the 3 fragments together. Light exploded outward from the reunited stone, and the ground beneath them heaved violently. From somewhere nearby, men shouted in alarm. Earthquake! A voice Clara recognized as Marshal Rutledge's called out. Get out of the canyon! But Clara, Maka, and Eleanor remained locked in their circle, the ritual reaching its climax as the sunlight touched the speaking stone. In the clay bowl, their blood and the sacred water began to glow with the same blue-green light as the arrowhead. We complete what was begun, they spoke in unison, words flowing from memory older than their current lives. We heal what was broken. We restore what was lost. The canyon walls seemed to waver as past and present overlapped. Clara glimpsed other figures standing with them, Swift Eagle and Hannah from 1823, the unnamed twin souls from 1783, and others stretching back through time, all performing the same ritual, all now present in this moment of convergence. The earthquake intensified, rocks falling around them, yet somehow missing their protective circle. Marshal Rutledge and 3 deputies stumbled into the ritual clearing, dust-covered and wide-eyed. They froze at the sight before them, Clara, Maka, and Eleanor standing in a triangle of light, the speaking stone between them pulsing with unearthly blue-green radiance, the reunited arrowhead hovering above the ancient clay bowl. What in God's name? Rutledge raised his rifle instinctively. No! Eleanor broke from the circle to place herself between the lawman and the ritual. If you interrupt now, everything fails again. The ground lurched violently, throwing the deputies off balance. A massive crack appeared in the canyon floor, zigzagging toward the speaking stone before stopping abruptly at the edge of the ritual circle. Clara and Maka remained transfixed, their bloodied hands still joined above the glowing bowl, their eyes reflecting the same ancient light as the arrowhead. Through their connection, Clara felt the land's centuries of pain and its desperate hope for healing. It's witchcraft, Deputy Collins cried, struggling to keep his footing as the earth continued to tremble. It's much older than that, came a new voice. Miss Begay emerged from behind a rock formation, supported by Tommy Jenkins. What you witness is the mending of an ancient wound, one your ancestors helped create. As if responding to her words, the light intensified, spreading outward from the speaking stone in concentric rings. Where it touched the fractured ground, the cracks sealed themselves. The violent shaking subsided to a gentle vibration, like a great beast settling after long agitation. Marshal Rutledge lowered his rifle slowly, awe overcoming fear as he witnessed the transformation. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the subsiding rumble. "The twin souls are completing their purpose," Miss Begay explained. "Healing the rift that has troubled this land since peoples first shed each other's blood here." The light suddenly contracted, gathering itself into a blinding flash that forced everyone to shield their eyes. When vision returned, Clara and Maka stood with their hands still clasped, the arrowhead now whole between their palms, its glow diminished but still present. The ritual was complete. Clara swayed slightly, returning to full awareness of her surroundings. She felt profoundly changed, as if parts of her soul that had been scattered across time had finally reunited. "It's done," Maka said softly, wonder in his voice. After all these generations, the canyon seemed different, more vibrant somehow, the colors deeper, the air fresher. Even the rising sun appeared to shine with renewed clarity upon the ancient stones. "The land is at peace," Eleanor confirmed, touching the speaking stone that now hummed with gentle warmth instead of agitated energy. Marshal Rutledge approached cautiously, his deputies hanging back. "I came to arrest a fugitive and a schoolteacher," he said, confusion evident in his expression. "Instead I find this." He gestured vaguely at the transformed canyon. "Perhaps there are forces beyond your jurisdiction, Marshal," Miss Begay suggested with a hint of humor. Before Rutledge could respond, a distant rumbling drew everyone's attention skyward. Dark clouds had gathered with unnatural speed above the canyon, and rain, a rare blessing in the desert, began to fall in heavy drops. "First rain of the season," Deputy Hayes whispered, "and right after the worst tremors anyone can remember." "Not a coincidence," Eleanor said. "The balance returns." The downpour intensified, soaking them all within moments. Marshal Rutledge stared at Clara and Maka, then at the healed cracks in the earth where moments before a chasm had threatened to swallow them all. "I don't understand what happened here," he admitted finally, "but I saw enough to know it wasn't evil." He returned his rifle to its scabbard. "Whatever you did stopped the earthquake that might have destroyed Whispering Creek. We remembered what was forgotten," Clara told him simply, "and healed what was broken." 1 month later, Clara stood beside Maka at the canyon entrance, watching him apply fresh paint to a new mural. Unlike his previous solitary work, this painting was a collaboration, Maka providing the traditional techniques, while Clara contributed elements from her Boston art education. The mural depicted not ancient memories but a vision of harmony. Apache and settler figures standing together beneath a shared sky, the spiral symbol transformed into a bridge between worlds. Eleanor approached, carrying a basket of provisions. "The town council approved your proposal," she announced. "The schoolhouse will reopen next month, accepting both settler and Apache children." Clara smiled, still surprised by how quickly perspectives had shifted after the events of the solstice. The earthquake, followed by healing rain that ended 3 years of drought, had humbled many in Whispering Creek. When several Apache families emerged from the mountains seeking peaceful contact, Marshal Rutledge himself had advocated for cooperation. "Will you teach again?" Eleanor asked. Clara exchanged a glance with Maka, their connection now a comfortable constant between them. "We both will," she replied. "Some subjects I know better, others he does. Together, we can offer something neither could alone." Maka added a final brushstroke to the mural, a small turquoise arrowhead hidden within the design, visible only to those who knew to look for it. "The cycle is complete," he said, stepping back to view their work. "But our story is just beginning." Clara took his hand, feeling the matching scars on their palms pressed together, a permanent reminder of the blood they'd given to heal the land. The turquoise arrowhead, now whole again, hung from a leather cord around both their necks on alternating days. No longer a talisman of separation, but a symbol of their shared purpose. "Not just our story," Clara corrected gently, looking toward Whispering Creek where settler and Apache children now played together outside Eleanor's store. "Everyone's."